Hey everyone, this is Megan with AbelCine. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited for this session. This is one of our Creative Forces series, and today I am joined with DP Michael Ognisanti. Michael worked on Work in Progress, which was it was picked up from pilot to season 1 and then to season 2. So we're going to find out more about him and his work, and also really look at a case study of this show and how it did so well. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me, Megan. It's great.
Audience, please feel free to chime in your questions. We want to make this interactive, and we will try to get to them as much as possible. Before we go any further, let me introduce Michael's background a little bit deeper. So Michael Ognisanti was born in Saginaw, Michigan, from the Midwest, and studied film theory at Michigan State University. But most of his education came from making bizarre short films with his friends. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about that. He began his career shooting commercials in Chicago, where he worked as a motion control operator and a Phantom high-speed technician. He has shot for such brands as McDonald's, Bud Light, Coors, Kraft, Peapod, and Kellogg's. His work in documentaries includes the 2017 award-winning feature 0 Weeks. In 2018, Michael shot the pilot for Work in Progress. The comedy series was accepted to the Sundance Indie Episodic Program, where it was acquired by Showtime. Michael shot the full 8-episode season, and he will be returning to shoot 10 episodes of season 2, which begins filming in the fall. So Michael, thanks again for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing more from you.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I always like to start off with how you got into the film industry, or what was it that, inspired you to join the industry?
Yeah, well, so I'm originally from Michigan. I went to Michigan State, and I've always, been into film from a young age. And I knew I kind of wanted to try to have a career in it. And like Chicago, being from the Midwest, like Chicago was kind of the logical next step, because there was a film industry here. It was thriving, and it was, there's a great community. So I moved here after college and just started PAing, trying to meet people. And then I ended up getting a lot of work at a tabletop studio, which there's a lot of like tabletop work in Chicago. It's kind of known for that. And they just like work a lot. So I was able to, just survive PAing and stuff. And then eventually I stuck around that studio, and I got on staff, and I stayed there for about like 8 or 9 years. And that's kind of where I started, like really where my career kind of started in terms of kind of hands-on opportunity to work with a lot of different things. So that's kind of like I started learning lighting there. And like you were saying, like I became a motion control operator. I was playing with that, and I did Phantom DIT. And then I was, camera operating. And so it was actually like a really good kind of apprenticeship to learn all these things, and then kind of figure out like where you actually want to go in the industry, which is, I think, kind of like important, just kind of like try everything, try to learn everything, and then see like, okay, my interests actually fall towards here, and then kind of pursue that.
Right. And so you even learned the Phantom on the job. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the advantages of being on staff is like, we worked a lot, but then I would be on the stage all the time. So we had all that stuff in the house. We had motion control rigs. There's a Phantom Flex like that lived there. So I was, afforded the opportunity for, the people who owned it and stuff, that they would be like, yeah, why don't you play with it? Here's how you use it. And I went to, it was actually through Abel. I did the Phantom training like in New York with my friend.
Right. Perfect.
To be like Phantom certified. So,
right.
So that was great. So, I had those opportunities in that time just to like play with stuff. So that's kind of how that happened. So I was really lucky for that.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like you had a lot of tools around you and mentors, I presume, to kind of learn from as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So then you decided, okay, let's take the jump to freelance, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, because I was in this kind of niche of tabletop, which was again, it was a great learning experience. You really learned a lot of technique about everything, lighting, camera work and stuff. And then I just, I kind of wanted to just branch out and try doing some more things, maybe shooting more narrative commercials, trying to do some documentary stuff. And so I just kind of took the leap to go freelance, which can kind of be a hard thing if you have like a staff position. But I just felt like I was ready to do it. Yeah, because I wanted to try to do different things. And I remember, I mean, obviously it was really scary, and plus, like, being in this world, I was like, well, how are those skills going to translate to the other parts of the world, other commercials and narrative and stuff?
Right.
And I found that like a lot of those techniques that you learn in tabletop are like totally transferable. Especially like with lighting. It's the tabletop world is really puts a lot of emphasis on lighting. Right. I mean, it's there's not really dialogue. It's just like the image, and what the client cares about is what does the cheeseburger look like,
Right. Exactly.
So, and if I remember someone told me once, like, if you can make a sandwich look good, you can make anything look good. So, so it's like, and all those kind of concepts were the same, like your key light, like how hard or soft do you want the key light? How do you make that happen? What's your ratios between the key and the fill light? Backlights and stuff like that. And so I found like going out and shooting other things, it all was very translated well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's like the discipline that you learned, and fundamentals, that you can take to anything. So I like if you can make a cheeseburger look good.
Yeah. Well, we shot, and early on too, we were still shooting on film. So, which was like, I was really fortunate to kind of just make that, just be in that that world before the transition to digital happened.
Yeah.
So you're not, you can't light to monitors really, because your video assist is just like an SD video assist. So it's like you're lighting by eye, and you're lighting with meters. So you're learning light meters, you're spot metering backgrounds and edge lights and stuff like that. So so I think that was definitely a great like tool to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what about, I think that's interesting in terms of then a little bit later you worked on a documentary. Was that really different for you in terms of, tabletop is you get the pre-light and then you have this shoot day.
Yeah.
And, everything, like you said, is so mapped out, and then you're kind of now in this cinema verite documentary style. So what was that like for you?
That was definitely a transition for sure, because in the commercial world, you're, very controlled studio environment. So you're not dealing with like, your son in the studio world can be wherever you want it.
Right.
So going to the documentary world, which I found it was great to do that and to learn it, but it was definitely different. You have to just adapt a lot more, and kind of look at the environment and find what the light's doing and then adapt to that, versus being able to control what the light is, which I think having the balance of those two worlds is really good, especially when you're moving into narrative, because sometimes you're on location and you don't have the control. Sometimes you're on a set that you build and you have that control. So kind of being able to navigate both those things is, I think, really important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. That way you have kind of a spectrum of tools and lessons, to pull from.
Yeah. Well, even like practical shooting with natural light and stuff, and you see how the light falls on people and things like that. And then when you go to artificial light, when it's set, you still want to kind of recreate that. So, being in the field, shooting documentaries, or just in someone's house and you see window light coming through, and if you can find how to make that look good, then when you go to actually try to mimic that on set for a narrative or something, you kind of have an idea of like what looks real or not,
Right. Yeah. Good point. Being an observer, and using that information.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about, I know that, you dove into purchasing the Sony FS7, maybe elaborate a little bit on how you chose that camera and, how you used it.
So, yeah, this was right about when I was transitioning to the documentary I was going to shoot. And it was a good friend of mine and a great documentary filmmaker, Kai Dickens,
Mhm.
And she had shot some documentaries before, and she was about to start her new documentary, and she asked me to shoot it. Just called 0 Weeks, by the way, and I think it's on Amazon Prime, so you guys should check it out. It's really good. So I was going to shoot this documentary. We knew documentaries take a long time, 2-3 years. So I think I had a Canon 5D or 7D or something, but we're like, I want something like a documentary camera, you know? So we were looking at C300s. This was, I guess, by the end of 2014, maybe. So C300s had been out for a while. And they're great cameras. Everyone was using them for documentary stuff. And then we were looking into it, but I was like, I feel like they're going to come out with a new one right when I buy this old one, you know? And so I'm like, I don't know about this. And then right around that same time, the FS7 was just announced, and I remember just looking online at what it looked like, and it had this really cool look to it. It kind of reminded me of the old 16 millimeter eclairs, you know, that like Pennybacker and the Maisel brothers would use, and it like had like the rounded back of the camera looked like almost like the mags that were on the back of the camera.
Right. Yeah.
So I just thought those like really cool, and it was just like had the ergonomics of it like felt better for over the shoulder, like the eyepiece was further forward, and it just felt more like a documentary camera to me versus the C300s, which were great. Like I'd used them a lot, but it was a little more like the eyepiece, you know, or the LCD viewfinder was like more in the back, and it was kind of more like that. So it just felt like the look of it. I liked the look of it, the ergonomics of it, and so I'm just like, let's just give it a shot. And had like internal 4K too. I remember. I think that was something that wasn't. I think the C300 next version had it too in every camera since, but that was something because you know we wanted to shoot it in 4K. So
absolutely. I remember when the Sony FS7 came out, you know, for its price point, what it could do was amazing. Do 4K
yeah, and then the other thing, which was huge, was the E mount. But because I never used like, you know, in commercials it's always PL mount, and then like Canon was EF mount. And so I'm like, well, I don't have any E mount lenses. But the shorter flange distance, so you know, made it so you can put any adapter on it. So, you know, I had Canon like L series lenses, so I got like a Metabones adapter. I put all my Canon lenses on it, and then if you're going to go shoot a commercial or something where you want PL lenses, like I had a little PL adapter, and just pop that on there, and now you have all your PL lenses. So I mean, that was a big deal. Like that was huge.
Yeah,
able to do that, because there are just no limitations. Or if you want to use the FS7 as like a B camera for if you're using a well, I guess the Venice wasn't out then, but F55 or even an Alexa or something, like you have all your PL mounted, you know, primes and stuff, or and then you want to use that as B camera, you can still use those same lenses.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Kai is an amazing filmmaker, and she also has a tabletop background. So
she does. Well, yeah, that's how we became friends. She was working at the studio. I don't know if I meant the studio was called MK Films, so out of Chicago, and so that's how we met, and we worked together for a long time. And so we were both we came up together, and we were both directing a little bit. And then we actually kind of both left around the same time too. So we've kind of been on the same journey together.
That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
So then after this documentary and, you know, 0 Weeks, and then you moved, you were still freelancing. Tell us a little bit about, you know, how you decided to dive into purchasing the Sony Venice.
Okay. So I started doing more commercial work. And kind of building up a client base. And I think just talking to producers and stuff, I was like thinking about, I'm like, well, what if I bought a higher end camera? You know, if I bought an Alexa or something, could it be like financially viable? Like, how does that work? And a lot of producers, like, you know, DPs, it can be beneficial to own a camera because sometimes it's easier for producers to be like, you know, this DP already owns this camera and stuff, so
Right.
So let's just bring him on. He brings everything. So that kind of made sense. But then there's also, it's risky too, because you have that camera. So you kind of like, you have to use it, which sometimes you like to use other cameras too, or you work with a director who's like, I've always used the Red, or I've always used the Alexa. And so I just feel more comfortable doing that, which is, it's fine. That's totally, that's fine. But, so that's kind of a risk, but most directors too, like they just will trust the DP that let him or her use the camera he wants.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like took a chance and pulled the trigger, kind of figure out like what are my loans? What do I have to pay a month? How many times do I have to rent it a month to, to pay, at least pay for the monthly payments,
Right. Yeah.
So I decided to do that. And then, and that was like, that'd have been last January of 2019, I guess.
Okay.
And then, I mean, kind of got lucky that the show got picked up like a month or two later. So that was really fortunate to be able to, and we could use that camera on the show.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell us how you got involved with Work in Progress with the pilot? So I know you shot the pilot first. That way we can kind of intro the trailer to the audience. Just how did you get involved with the project and the beginning of it?
Okay. So the show was created by Abby McEnany and Tim Mason, who I've known for a long time. They were both from the improv community, and I knew some people in the improv community and stuff. So we just kind of got connected that way. I was good friends with Tim's wife, Erin, who actually we worked together too. She did craft service and stuff. So it's it's a Chicago community, so everyone kind of knows each other. So, and then Tim was on Second City main stage, and he started copywriting at an ad agency, and then he started directing some stuff, and he was directing commercials, and then he did this. He did a short called No Other Way to Say It, which was like hilarious and just really well made, and it like did really well in awards and went to festivals and stuff. And I remember like really liking it, and I think I just like called him or emailed him, and this was like, and I wanted to do more narrative stuff, and I'm just like, I want to find people who are doing this and doing it well, and like here's Tim, he's directing commercials, he's doing these great narrative things. So I just called him and I said, hey, what are you doing? Let's get together, maybe we could work together and stuff. So we just kind of met up, and then he had some ideas that he was working on, and we kind of came from different backgrounds. Like he comes from the improv writer performer world. I'm more from the production side, so I think we kind of like blended well together. So anyway, so we started shooting commercials together, did a few shorts, and then he sent me the script that he and Abby had written, and it was about Abby's life. And they thought it was like amazing and really funny and just heartwarming, and written through Abby's eyes, who is just a unique and lovable person too. So like you could just see like the potential in it. And so obviously I was like totally on board. I'm like, yes, I want to do this. Let's do it.
Right. And how long before, sometimes when you read a script, it's a long time before they're really ready to shoot it. I mean, was there kind of like this time period where you didn't know if it was going to happen, or what was that like?
It was like he had sent it to me a few months before, and we were talking about it occasionally, and it was really always like, well, how are we going to do this? Or maybe, and then at some point we like, I think like the three of us had met and we're like, let's just do this. Like, how many days can we do this? And we kind of mapped it out like, okay, maybe we can do this in 3 days. And then, well, what do we do to fund it? And it was someone was like, well, can you like try to get it like actually funded and reach out to production companies or investors and try to like get this pilot. And we didn't, I think at one point it was like, is it a web series? Or I think they wanted to be a pilot, but then they're like, maybe it's a web series. But then it just kind of became, why don't we just try to like do this like kind of bare bones? And and just try to get it done with like a small crew and not make this huge production out of it. Because in reality, you're just kind of trying to show what you want this show to be, kind of like how you kind of want it to look, how you want it to feel.
Right.
And it's a very character driven story too, right? So like that's the most important thing, is to get those ideas out there so people can see it and what the show could be. So that was kind of why we're like, let's just figure out how to do this. And being in Chicago, which is like, just, I don't know, you could have done it really anywhere else. Because you have this, you have in Chicago, you have like, it's big enough that you have all the resources and the talent and the infrastructure, but it's just small enough that everybody knows each other. People are like, it's a very just like active, creative community. So people want to work on projects and they're willing to work for free because they've just been spent 2 months on shooting commercials, and they're like, I want to do something maybe a little bit more fun. So there's that community there, like, yeah, we'll help you. So like finding people to do it was like not that hard. And it was like, this is so much fun. So I do think that like being in Chicago, I don't know that we could have done that anywhere else. Locations too, like it's so much easier to shoot around Chicago than if you were in like New York or LA, and knowing people like, hey, can we use your apartment? Or, oh, I know this guy, like, I think like Tim knew a guy that owned the restaurant that we shot.
Oh, okay.
And like for the diner scene or what's that?
There's a lot of different locations that you had to shoot. Yeah.
And they're all like friends' apartments or friends' coffee shops and bars and stuff like that. So
that's really great. Well, I think we should take a look at the trailer, and before we do, I just wanted to bring up one other thing, and we can deep dive into this a little bit more. But I think that for those of you that haven't seen it, it is very unique. It's kind of like a little glimpse at someone's life, and it's a type of character we don't get to see a lot in terms of representation. And so I think that, Michael, in terms of speaking to your, people were on board and were collaborative, I would guess that a lot of that was because people saw the, need for it. And it's kind of like this comedy, but there's also these, deeper themes obviously throughout it. And so do you think that kind of, it stands out, I guess is what I mean.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It was a voice, Abby is a voice that you don't see in media or in pop culture and like TV and film. So I think that really resonated with people, and like, and I mean, that goes into just the inclusivity of the whole, of everything, of the crew, and of like the mentality of the show is like different voices and telling different stories, which I think really was the appeal for people to want to work on it, and for people to want to see it. I do think that definitely went a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, with that said, let's take a look at the trailer.
I laid out 180 almonds, and every day I'm just gonna throw one away. And if there's one almond left and I don't feel any better, I'm done. I'm out. You know what I mean?
You did not kill your therapist.
I'm pretty sure I did. It was actually a really big deal to me.
Of course, it's just not like your child or something.
Well, I don't have a child.
Thank God, right?
Thank God I don't have a child?
The child that died.
I need to make changes, right? And like, figure out how to be better.
Abby, this is Chris, the waiter from Daisy's. Your sister gave me your number.
She thinks you're gorgeous. Also, she killed someone today.
What?
Well, not really.
Allison is such
I'm a trans man.
I haven't been out with an attractive trans man in ever, so. I've just always been terrified about what's wrong with me, obsessed about why everything makes me anxious.
Chris likes a project, so.
Project?
I will never be.
I'm this fat, struggling queer dyke, and that is my identity.
Free.
My life is harder than anybody else's!
Can I make a sweeping generalization? You are a much better person than you think you are.
Julia Sweeney from Saturday Night Live. Her character Pat, who nobody could tell was a man or a woman, ruined my life. People would always say that I looked like Pat.
Did you?
I mean, I wore a lot of overalls.
They're too far under. Hi, Abby. I'm Julia. Oh.
I definitely recommend watching that show if you guys haven't seen it already. It's actually, it's on Showtime, but it's free through Amazon Prime for today. So if you binge watch it today, it's definitely worth a watch. Very funny. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the deeper themes as well. But really nice work, Michael.
Thank you.
So I think, you know what, to me, what is really interesting about this project is like you said, it's really indie from the beginning. You know, everyone was really collaborative, kind of like pulling strings in terms of like who can help us out. And so I think I'd like to hear from you, what was that sentiment like on set? Did you think that those 3 days of shooting the pilot were gonna, you know, take you to Sundance? You know, what was kind of like the life of the project when you guys first started it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like, you know, when you get started, you know, you think you have something that's good and you hope that it could have a life, you know, after, and you're like optimistic about it, but then, you know, it's also like, it's going to go to Sundance. It's going to get picked up by Showtime, like, or, you know, some of those things you don't really even want to like think about at the time, because you just want to like enjoy the moment, have fun making it. And you really like, you can't make something thinking it's because it's going to be huge. Like you make it because you think it's good and it's something you care about. And
right.
So yeah, I mean, everything that happened after the pilot was kind of like, what, you know, kind of shocking. Not because we didn't think it was good, but it's still just like, I mean, you know, there's a lot of great content out there, and there's only so much room for everything. So yeah, I mean, when we, you know, found out we got into Sundance, which is, you know, I think, you know, we shot the pilot in July and they edited it pretty quickly. And I think, you know, they were debating whether even to send it out to Sundance, because I mean, they literally, I think, got it just under the radar, or just under the deadline to send it in. And I think they're just like, well, we'll just send it and see what happens. And you know, it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, you know, the shooting style, I think something that's interesting, you know, after watching it, is there is a mixture of camera movement. There's kind of this handheld, there's the Steadicam, and then there's also kind of this cinema verite type style, because we are taking a look at her life, you know. So could you talk through a little bit about your approach to the shooting style?
Well, just in conversations with Tim, who he directed all 8 episodes. So, and talking to him about like how he saw it was this kind of observational, you know, much of it's this character study. Abby's in like every scene, and it's really just like kind of following her life. So, we talked about it just having this kind of loose feel. So we're almost always handheld, or certain scenes were Steadicam for specific reasons, I guess. And I think, I mean, one like just logistical reason why it was handheld is because they did rely on improvising, right? So, you know, there's a script for sure, but then like, you know, Tim's doing a lot of takes, and sometimes they're just like leaning towards like, oh, this is good, we're onto something here, let's, you know, kind of improvise here and there. And Abby is such like an amazing improviser that she'll just like come up with something on the fly, and or, you know, maybe she's not sticking to the actual blocking, or maybe sometimes we're not even like really stringently blocking either, because we want it to feel kind of loose. So being handheld is so much easier. Like, you know, you're not on sticks or a dolly, you can just like quickly run over and grab something. And so that was like logistically a big reason for it. And then the other way, this is like what you said, just like, I mean, like kind of verite-ish, I guess, or just keeping it looser and just little less formal in terms of because it kind of fell into what the content of the show was too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to me as a viewer, it gives it a natural, authentic feel. And I think that that's, so important when, you're trying to represent a personality or a persona,
Yeah. I mean, and I guess if you, the show too is like, we're shooting a lot of locations, practical locations in Chicago, in Andersonville,
Mhm.
and so it has this like realistic feel. Like some of the locations that we shot in were locations that Abby actually goes to,
Right.
like Farragut's, she goes there, or like the coffee shops and stuff. And so that's like the realism of the show. I think then it kind of like, yeah, you said it kind of fits it.
Right. So what about your lighting strategy then? I mean, thinking of, this kind of fast-paced three-day pilot, a lot of location, and also in terms of, I had a feeling you were going to say improvisation just due to her background. So, did you kind of have to be strategic in terms of how you lit it for time and also for flexibility?
Yeah, well, it definitely has challenges if you're doing a lot of, there is improv and you're not exactly sure. I mean, we tried to keep it somewhat in this spot where the scene's supposed to happen, but we ended up, we try to do a little, kind of keep it minimal, we usually have, a key light that's kind of soft, and then a lot of times it'll just kind of fall off, so you don't have a lot of lights. We're using smaller LEDs that we can either kind of rig up so they're above things, so you can move around, not see them. We also, well, one thing we did that was could be a little tricky was we did a lot of cross shooting. So, two cameras, one camera shooting the character this way, other camera shooting the character that way, which is not, it's not something you do a lot because it can be very tricky because, right, one camera shooting the person this way, how are you going to have the light coming from the other direction when the camera's looking that way?
Right.
So, but the reason we did that, which I think was actually really important, was because of all the improvisation. So Abby or some of the other characters who are also improvisers just kind of jump on something and say something that was really great but not planned. You want to see the reaction of that other person, right? Because it's like authentic. It's an authentic reaction. So, so that was why we thought when we could, because sometimes it's just you can't do it, but when we could, try to shoot both characters cross shooting, which I guess I'm getting a little off track, but like lighting went into that, right? Because then you have to like even more strategically figure out how are we gonna light this. So
and it not be seen, right, in the other angle or
right. So sometimes if you want to have a light a little more frontal, you just kind of can't. So you kind of we'll make it a little more edgy and have it fall off more. But actually, you kind of like that look anyway, So not as flat, just kind of have it a little more contrasting, fall off, sometimes a softer contrast. So, and I found it can work too if it's like if you're keeping the shots more medium shots, right? Because then you're kind of cropping off where lights are.
Absolutely.
We try to at least do that, like not too wide shots of cross shooting it's very difficult.
Right, that would be almost impossible in a location.
Yeah. But again, though, so like we ended up using a lot of LEDs, things that we can put on walls. We use the Asteras a lot because they're light, like and you can just put them on a wall. They're RGB. You can control them with an iPad. So it makes it easier to get around because you're not seeing big lights everywhere and cables and things like that.
Right, absolutely. So I'd love to take a look at, I know you have some storyboards that we can look juxtaposed with how the show actually was done. And I think our first one is from the pilot. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, great. I think so.
I'll see it.
You can talk us through it when we see it. So let's go ahead and cue up the storyboard, and then Michael, if you could tell us a little bit about what we're looking at and what the concept was here.
I'm just looking at those Sims. They're like creepy. But So the way our approach was, or at least for the pilot and some of the show, was I found a way to make storyboards in using the 3D program, which I have no experience in 3D design or anything like that, but was kind of roughly able to work in Cinema 4D so that I could create or kind of build the practical locations in a virtual world. And so, like, for this, we shot at this bar and went and did the tech scout. I took all the measurements of the space. How long was the bar, the back wall, where was the kind of where the tables were, how spread out the tables were. And then I can take all that information and plug that into the software and start building like the schematics of the space. I can put the length of how long do the walls need to be, how high are they. I can drop the characters in, have them sit in certain spots. And then, I mean, really the best thing is like you can use a virtual camera that simulates a real camera, even like with sensor size and lensing, right? So like, I think you can see like the second and third images obviously are really long lenses because everything is really compressed. You can even see like the background is compressed, and it also it shows depth of field, right? So you can see the background there, it's compressed and it's really soft and muddy. And so I thought it was really helpful to be able to kind of like plan out these shots beforehand and give you an even better sense versus just 2D storyboards of somebody drawing, which sometimes when you get to location, you're looking like, well, that's great, but there's no way we can do that here.
Right.
So we, so for the pilot, I did that for everything. And so I would, we'd go to location, I would map these all out, and then I would meet with Tim and we'd look at them all, and then he would just give me notes. He'd be like, okay, I like this, but I see this more like that. And then I can go and actually pretty easily make adjustments, you know? So I'd be like, oh, at those close-ups, you know, let's, you know, make those a little wider. What if we actually had a wider lens on it to see more of what's around them? Like I can show him what that would look like, you know, to some extent. I mean, it's not 100% accurate, but it definitely gives you an idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of where it's going to go. And I think, yeah, and I think the next slide would show what we actually shot, right?
Yeah, this is great.
So you can see like even those like the frame 4 with the red doors back there, like so I was able to kind of build that beforehand.
Yeah, I love hearing how you went to the location, you know, in terms of part of your scout, you know, you measured things and then use that as intel, you know, for what you could accomplish.
Yeah, it's really helpful, especially I mean, the biggest part is like the preparation, just the pre-planning of it is huge. I'm like a big believer in that because but especially for most of the things we work on, like there's just not a lot of time. You always want more time. So like the more prepared you can be going into it, I think is, you know, it's like, I don't know how you could do it any other way.
Right. Absolutely. And then you mentioned you ended up showing a lot of this pre-visualization to Showtime as well. So what was that like? Yeah,
I mean, it was just a lot of it was you know, before the show, they just, you know, they come in, they kind of want to see how everything's going and like what's your plan for the look of this. And I mean, they'd seen the pilot, so they had some of that stuff, so you know, they want to see what's your plan for the look of it, what's your approach. And so, you know, we just thought, well, let's kind of show them how our approach is before, you know, for pre-production stuff. So we showed them some of this stuff, and then, you know, we had mood boards and a lot of things like that. So I was, you know, ripping screen grabs from shows and movies that we liked,
right,
and showed them all that stuff.
Right. So actually, I realized I got ahead of myself because I think what we should hear about is so this is the pilot. You get it done in 3 days. They get it barely into the deadline of Sundance, and then you whip to Sundance. What was that like?
Mm-hmm. It was amazing. I'd never been to Sundance, and it was a cool vibe, and it was. I remember we were there. I guess this was early 2019, and we were there when Chicago had the polar vortex.
Yes.
So I remember like talking to people back home. It's like it's 40 below zero here. Nobody can go outside, and we're in Park City. It's like beautiful blue sky, 35, 40 degrees. Walking downtown, going to movies, going to little theaters, and it was really cool. And we screened. So we had like 3 or 4 screenings of the show, and they all went really well. And it was really fun because you're with like there's other like episodic TV programs, so there's other people like in your group, so you're seeing these other filmmakers. You're all going there together, and you're starting to meet people, and it's just like this really cool little a little community that we had there.
Absolutely. Nice.
So yeah, it was great.
And then how do you find out, what's that process like, especially as the DP? How did you find out that Showtime was interested?
I mean, I'm kind of out of the loop after that. Like,
right, exactly. That's right.
I hear like a few updates about like, oh yeah, we're having meetings with them and we're having meetings with them, but like,
right.
It wasn't really until I got the call from Tim and Abby that were like Showtime picked it up.
Wow,
and I think that was, I don't know, that was maybe a month after Sundance, something like that. So yeah, I mean, you have the meetings,
right?
I guess, and they had a bunch of meetings, and Showtime liked it.
That's amazing. And then I know Lilly Bukowski got on board, who is also actually based out of Chicago, which people might not know. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, what it was like once she got involved.
I mean, that was like unbelievable. I mean, she lives in Andersonville too, actually, where Abby, and so Abby and her had known each other, and I think she had signed on to EP like right around Sundance or just before Sundance or something. So so she was there like pretty early on.
So we were just, right before we went down, Michael, thanks for hanging in there with us too. We were just touching base on Lilly Bukowski getting involved, who's obviously part of the Wachowski team that did The Matrix and Sense8. So, and also, lives in Chicago. So I think that's about where we got taken down. So why don't you kind of mention, what that was like for her to be on board? And I know she's pretty hands-on, so she was on set, I imagine, as well.
Yeah. Definitely. So she was signed on pretty early on, and as an EP and as a writer, and it was just, I mean, it was amazing for me, obviously, like to have someone like that was so much experience and just like was just creatively like genius and just had such a visual sense. And I mean, she made The Matrix, so but it was so cool to be able to like pick her brain and ask her things, and she was like just the sweetest, nicest, most supportive like person too. Coming, working with people who like Tim and myself and Abby, who we'd never made a TV show before, but she was just so supportive and encouraging. And so it was great. I would just, could kind of run by things by her about like how I would like to shoot this scene. What do you think about this? And she just was really good at just visualizing things, and would have, these ideas. I'd be like, oh yeah, obviously, like that's probably how we should do it.
Right.
So it was great having her, and yeah, she was very involved. She would be on set all the time, and very involved, but also like hands off. She didn't just barge in and say do this. She was very supportive of what I was trying to do and what my vision was too. So it couldn't have been a better experience. It was fantastic.
So you did the pilot in 3 days. What was it like now that it was funded? Did that feel different in terms of your budget to work with and how many days per episode, or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to have money to actually shoot the show. It wasn't, it was a lower budget, but
Sure.
yeah, it was nice to be able to pay people and stuff.
Right.
So I think we did 5 days an episode. So it was still pretty pretty jam packed to do 5 days. So, but it was it was great though. We did have to move fast, but yeah, I mean, they actually the first episode is the pilot, and we actually aired the pilot. They actually aired the pilot that we shot for Sundance. So we never actually reshot that, which was really great. It was it was flattering that they wanted to that they liked it. Like, let's just air it.
Right.
But it was also like, oh wait, we got money now. Can't we just like maybe reshoot that, or
Sure.
I could probably do that a little bit better. And
Right.
But yeah, oh well.
Yeah.
So-
We got a nice little question to jump in here regarding the transition from pilot to the greenlit season. One of the viewers was wondering if the crew from the pilot stayed on to ultimately do the season as well, and if that is common, or if alternatively production generally likes to swap out the crew and bring their own people on.
Yeah, good question. Some people did. Our gaffer, Ron Leahy, stayed on. And I mean, the crew was, it was like, I think our G&E crew for the pilot was like Ron plus 2. And I think one of the guys that did work on it, one of the grips, I think did end up coming on the show. And then in terms of camera, it was just me on camera. I think for one day we had another operator. I'm not sure that they actually came into the show, but yeah, our gaffer, Ron, definitely came on with us, and maybe a few other, I think, on the producer side too, stuck around.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we tried to, and I think Tim and Abby were really really encouraging that too. It was like, if you helped out on the pilot, we want to try to find a room for you on the show if you can do it, if you want to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, I guess that made me think too, now that you had a little bit more budget, but also you had, a concept and a system that worked, were there things that you changed, that you learned from in terms of the pilot, in terms of how you lit or gear that you used, were there things that you changed for the show?
Yeah. I mean, I think just having more resources and more gear was really helpful. Cause I guess it was a year later too. So, there was just more things available. I think, I don't know that like, the light mats were around when we shot the pilot, and those are great cause it's a nice spread of the light, but it's really light too. So I really liked using those.
Right.
I mentioned the Asteras too. I don't know that those were really around. So some of the instruments were different. But the terms of like the look and like the kind of the style of it, we kind of wanted to keep within that world.
Mm-hmm.
But just we had a few more. We had like 2 cameras the whole time too, and so I think so we did a few things differently.
So this was 2 Sony Venices, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
well, not on the pilot though, just in the show, because the pilot the Venices weren't even out. So
oh, right, okay, right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. So what did you shoot the pilot on, FS7?
Those are Alexas.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you moved to 2 Venices for the show, and and then talk a little bit about that, maybe in terms of that being was that a new camera for you then, that when the show kind of got picked up? Was that right when you had just kind of taken it on board?
Well, I'd had it. I think I got it in January, so I'd had it for 6-8 months before. So I'd used it enough that we knew it. I knew what it was doing, and like I knew what it could do, and done a lot of testing with it. Shot in commercials with it, so I was very confident in what it could do. and it just had like, it had just so many great features on it that I loved. The one-stop increments ND, like it's just, it seems like kind of a simple thing. I was always like, how come they don't have this, for the Lexus and stuff? But like when it's just so great,
Right.
to have one stop. And then that camera too, just the build of it, like the menu options on both sides of the camera, so you can like the operator can change things really quick, and the AC can run and change things really quick. So that was like super helpful, especially if we're on set and I'm operating and maybe I see something the last second. I'm like, I want to ND down, and the AC's, remote focus. Maybe they're offset on their monitor.
Right.
So I'll just be like, I got it, shout it out, stop in, and so you don't have to like really move.
Right.
So your main functions of, white balance and ASA and shutter, ND,
Right.
all that stuff. So I loved that aspect of the camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, to answer your question, like going into it, we'd used it and we kind of had an idea of how it was going to work and the advantages of it.
Okay, great. And the look and everything. So with all the camera movement, the handheld and the Steadicam and small locations, did you get to utilize the Rialto setup at all?
Yeah, we had one camera was fitted with the Rialto for the whole time. I mean, when we needed it. So for small, like if we're in a car and I was in the car, obviously it would be great for stuff in the bathroom, or we wanted to just put the camera in the corner. The Rialto is great. And then I kind of ended up just using it for handheld. Like by the end, I was just using it all the time for handheld because it was just lighter. And I would, so we had like a handheld rig that we kind of configured so I could have it. So it's tethered to the body, right? And we had our dolly grip, Ingrid. She actually like had the harness, like the baby Bjorn is what we're calling it, where like the body's like strapped to you. And the tether post is following me. So it was really funny, but it worked. And she could kind of like walk with me if I'm walking, and it was, and sometimes it's funny because sometimes if you're moving a lot in the set and things are just kind of happening fast, I would just I kind of forget that she's tethered to me, and I would just start moving. And I kind of feel this tug. I'm like, oh, I forgot she's back there.
Right.
Trying to like catch up to me, and I think I drove her crazy. But
sounds like it ended up working out though.
And the Rialto was, it's just great. It's so cool because, I had like a handheld or like an over the shoulder rig for it. And then I also could just like hold it like this and kind of run around. I mean, it's like a DSLR, right? I mean, it's a little bulkier, but you can kind of do the same things with it.
Right. I think we should take a look at some of your behind the scenes photos too, and we can kind of just screen those as you and I keep talking about the setup, because I think what also is interesting for people is always, what lenses did you use, and is that something that changed as well from the pilot to the show?
Mm-hmm.
While we're looking at those, and maybe there's a good still that comes up, we also have a question specifically regarding night exteriors with the Venice, and whether you were lighting for 800 or 2500 ISO.
Yeah. Okay. So the dual sensors are base 500 and then base 2500. For most of the night exteriors, I would still get away with shooting on the 500 based on just like how we want it to look. If I want it to be darker and I can utilize like street lights or something like that. But there were definitely times when we go to the 2500 base, which was like great, and it still had a really clean, sensor. So it kind of depended too. I think actually when we would like car scenes, I think I remember if we were doing a car scene at night, and there was something where we were just kind of doing it just kind of rough, where I would sit in the front seat and try to shoot them in the back seat. I think a lot of times we'd go to 2500 base for that. and then what I would do sometimes is go to the 2500 base, but then try to shoot at like 1600, just so, I don't know, I feel like I'm giving the sensor a little bit more, pushing to get him a little more light, to try to reduce like noise in the blacks, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, having that tool to do that was fantastic. And then even shooting 500, shooting at the 500 base, I would still go up to, and we did I did some camera tests with this with my colorist, that we'd go up to 1250, and it would still, at the 500 base, it still felt pretty clean. Because I remember talking to my colorist about this. I was like, was it better to go up, like push the 500 sensor to 1250, or to go to 2500 and then pull it down to 1250? Like, what's the cleaner image? And so we kind of looked at it, and he thought that the 1250 going up from 500 base was kind of the way to go. So, but yeah, again, like shooting those night exteriors, we kind of go back and forth, but I loved having that 2500 base. It was amazing. We could push it to, I think I might have pushed it to 3200, or I don't think we ever did 4000, but I think you can get away with it too.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like, especially with the show, having that flexibility was key, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because you're moving really fast. So it's like, you don't have time to grab a light, or you're just like, we're, out here in the dark, where are we going to, we can't bring anything. There's no power, sometimes we're like, we don't really have any power where we're shooting. So we have some battery operated LEDs, and then whatever else is ambient light around you,
Right. So actually, since you mentioned color, I think it would be interesting also to hear about that workflow a little bit. Did you have a DIT on location, and were you doing any looks or LUTs in the camera, or were you primarily speaking with your colorist?
Yeah, I mean, so the colorist really, I had some conversations with him before, but I've actually been working with him more since over this quarantine. We've been doing I've been doing like remote camera tests just to kind of figure some things out, because we've had time.
Yeah.
So figuring things out for season 2, but he kind of came on a little bit later, so we talked a little bit, but with the DIT, I did work with him quite a bit on set, but we try not to change too much. I think I just used the Sony 709 LUT, and and he would get it, he'd put that on. I think we would tweak a few things just to get it, that we would send then for dailies, but I think that was more even early on. I was tweaking things just to try to be like, what do we want for the base of the show? Like, what are we looking for? And maybe the first week or two, we were tweaking more things. And then by the end, I was just like, this is good, or this is the 709 LUT is good. And then he might just do a little tweak, because he'd know that he kind of knew an idea of what I wanted.
Right.
So, because it's not, you don't really want to do too much while you're shooting, you don't want to like play a ton with windows and and tweaking it. It's too much.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with a project, this sounds like the story, you had to let the story drive it for you, and focus on the best way to show that.
Yeah. And also too, I just kind of want it to be a representation of like what I shot, and just like, here's a base LUT, here's what we shot, and then going back in post in the color sessions, then I can play around, then we can kind of be like, all right, here's what I was looking at on set. Now, like, that's Eric Ullman, who's our DIT.
Yeah, that's maybe Eric's listening.
Eric?
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
Okay. He's amazing.
That's great.
So, so I kind of like that idea of like trying not to do too much beforehand, and then you can play with it a little bit, on the back end.
Right. And
that's, okay.
I was just curious about lens choices, because we didn't get to touch on that yet in terms of what lenses did you use.
I think we used the Ingenue Easy 2s. So we had 2 sets of those. We had the wider, which I think was the 15 to 40, right?
Yeah.
And then the 30 to 90.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a 30 to 90 there, I think. Which we lived on that lens like almost exclusively, like just because it was a good range
Right.
for us.
Yeah.
And then in Tim too, like, which you see a lot in the show, he really liked really like extreme close-ups, right? So especially with Abby, if she's having a scene where she's breaking down, it's just, it's really emotionally effective to have
Right.
this like long lens of extreme close-ups. So that was, having zoom lenses was definitely helpful. It just sped things up. And I've never really used, I've used zooms, but like when I was doing more the commercials and all this stuff, like for professional jobs, I normally use primes,
Right.
just because I like that idea of finding the lens that you want and then kind of moving around so you kind of keep that same feel of what that lens is.
Right.
But this was helpful to just be able to quickly reframe. Although sometimes I did find myself treating the zooms like primes, like say we're on a 50 and then maybe the Tims are like, can we widen out a little bit? And I found myself just backing up as opposed to widening the lens. I'm like, I want to be on the 50, so I'm just going to walk back.
Right. Yeah, I was going to mention that about the close-ups because I did notice that in a lot of the episodes, in the moments when he is kind of having these internal, she's actually even like talking to her therapist that isn't there anymore, in her head, and there's a lot more long lens, there's a lot more flares, there's a lot more kind of in her head kind of moments that I liked.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the times when we could get away with being a little more stylistic, right? Because I think the show is kind of grounded in reality, so we tried to avoid some of those kind of tricks of lens flares and things like that. But you get sucked into a little bit because like lens flares look cool.
Right.
So I think when we found moments like that the scene could feel a little bit more stylized because it's it's her talking to no one, or if it's her having a major breakdown or something like that, you can get away with a little bit more of a stylistic kind of technique.
Right. Absolutely. And I actually was thinking too, we've talked a lot about the technical. I think, in terms of the creative, it's such an interesting show because it is so much about inclusion. We see so many different representations of different types of people. And then on top of that, she's also, battling this mental illness, right? And we're the show starts out, for those of you that haven't seen it, where she's with her therapist and her therapist actually dies while she's in a session. And there's kind of this comedic aspect to that, but then she's kind of left, to her own thoughts to try to work it out. And, Michael, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the significance of the almond scene and then also how you shot that.
Okay. Well, yeah, the almonds, represent a lot, but they represent, I guess, a day of her life. And so she's had this countdown of when she's going to kill herself if her life doesn't get better. So, which, it's a funny show, but there's definitely deals with a lot of dark premises. So, the almonds were, that was kind of this motif too of the show. Like we're always trying to shoot the almonds in different ways, So, whether it's, sometimes it's just her tossing an almond into the trash, and sometimes, we had almonds lined up on the table, and maybe the almonds are in the foreground or something like that, and shooting her coming up from the background and grabbing them, and so we tried to like keep that as visually as an important part of the show because it really did it was symbolic of a lot of things. So
right.
and then like it kind of culminates into the episode 8 when we shot the almonds slow motion with the Phantom. So that was that's kind of like how that season 8 progression was, to see this final almond falling through space in this dream sequence she's having. So
let's take a look at that. I know we've got a couple stills of how you shot that. So while those are getting queued up, one thing I would mention that I thought of there is this one scene where things seem to be going better for her, and her partner says like, I didn't know you were still doing that, you know, in terms of counting the almonds and counting down, and you don't actually see her do it. She's off screen. You kind of realize that's what she's doing. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. She throws it in the garbage disposal. I think.
Exactly. Yeah. But then, you know, then we have this episode where obviously, you know, it's much more significant because we're seeing it being the last almond and everything. So maybe talk through, you know, obviously you had a Phantom background. So what was that like in terms of choosing the Phantom and getting that approved, you know, with production?
Yeah. So like early on, Tim and Abby had, you know, they conceptualized this dream, and they knew they wanted this impactful idea of like an almond falling through like infinity on black or something. And they're like, we should do it, you know, practically, you know, as a Phantom. And I was like, yeah, of course. But there's some people that said like, well, you should probably just do a visual effects, right? Because we don't know like budget and when can we actually fit it into our schedule, because our schedule is so crammed.
Right.
But we really pushed for it for a couple of reasons. One, I think it just, anytime you can do it practically, it's better. It's going to look better, I think. And also just, you have so much more flexibility, I think, when you're shooting practically, in terms of, you know, we can shoot an almond dropping with the camera straight on. I can, within a few, you know, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I can drop down and shoot up looking at the almond as it comes down. So if you're doing a visual effects shot, you kind of have to like, okay, this is our shot. We want to fall here. You want to start making changes like that is harder, I think, in visual effects, or it's going to cost you more money.
Right.
And so we had a day, we just had a day, and actually it was probably 2 months after principal photography was done. It kept getting pushed. Like we had it in the schedule. And then if there's like a rain day or something where like it was like the first thing that would go would be the Phantom, because like we can just do that anytime. So it kept getting pushed and pushed. And I think it was, I mean, we didn't shoot that until like November or something like that. Like it was close to the end. So we had a day where we brought the camera in and had a small crew and just shot a bunch of different shots of an oversized almond falling through space. The almond was probably like this big. And it was fun because I've had experience doing it before. So I kind of had an idea of like what we could do, like what we actually could do, and then how we could light it. And so we ended up shooting, I mean, and it's in that scene we shot, I mean, I don't know, like 8 or 9 different kind of angles, you know, and then we started dropping the big almond on the little almonds, and we like made a little, like we cut like a lining of a trash bag, so you can, because I think the scene starts with like looking up and she drops it and it starts falling, and then all these other things happen. So so we were able, but we were able to just get a lot of different shots for one day to shoot practically, and I think that was just beneficial and like the best way to do it.
I love that.
You're gonna cut a hole in the bottom of a trash can.
I love how your background too, you know, obviously helped you feel confident and that was the right choice, and you know, just kind of sometimes how that works out where things kind of come back around and
I know, it is kind of fun like that. Well, that was another thing, because in shooting Phantom, a lot in the tabletop, we used to build oversized models, right? Just because like lensing wise, it just is way, you know, if you're shooting tiny little things, you can't do much, you can't shoot much, you know, you can't get any kind of dramatic feel, or so we would do that. We would build oversized strawberries or whatever. And so when this came up, I was like, we need to make an oversized almond,
right?
Make big almond, and it'll just help us get the more dramatic lensing that we want. So there's a model maker in Chicago that we used to use a lot, and he's like amazing, and he made this almond. And I remember when he brought it in, like I was showing like the producers and the crew, and I'm like, they were just like confounded about how like real it looked. It was amazing. I mean, it's not really until that shot when they're falling on the small almonds that you realize it's not real.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so interesting. What was it like, you know, with Showtime involved? I'm curious, during season 1, you know, did you ever hear feedback from them? Were there things that they, you know, I was thinking of asking about the technical requirements too. of Showtime streaming, but I know you were also already shooting in 4K. So was there any sort of thing where Showtime was involved, or feedback that you had to kind of adjust or change anything?
I mean, they were great. They would get dailies every day, so they would watch, and I mean, I think like no feedback is good feedback, at least on my end. So like,
Right.
I think they're thinking about a lot of other things too than just like, how did that shot look? What was the lighting like on that shot?
Yeah.
So I think if you're not hearing things, that's good. But yeah, I mean, from the feedback we did get, it was always really positive. And they would send notes like, yeah, we like that looked good and stuff. So but they're really supportive, and they really kind of let us do our thing too.
That's great.
So it was really, it's great.
And so season 1 ends, let's kind of take it to the next timeline here. Season 1 ends, and I don't know when it aired in relationship to when you shot it, probably quite some time.
When season 1
when it aired, did it air, because you still had that phantom shot and everything, was there quite
so I can't remember. I think season 1 it started at the end of December, or kind of early December. So we finished shooting. It was a tight timeline though, window to get us, like they had 2 months to like edit everything or something and put everything together. So it was like really fast turnaround. And yeah, I think we shot that almond shot maybe less than a month before like the show was airing.
Okay.
So it was 8 episodes. So then it went, that would make sense, because it went through like the end of January, I think.
Okay. And when did you find out that they wanted to go for a season 2?
Pretty shortly after the last episode. I think maybe within a couple weeks or a few weeks, we found out.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice to like. I was saying, it's like you don't want to be a one-term president.
Right.
But I hope we have one this time.
I was gonna say, yeah. Sure.
This time it'd be nice to have one-term president, but
yeah.
Right. But so yeah, it's like that validation, that you did, you did a good job, and they asked you back. So, and they they asked me back. So
right, that's amazing. So I know that's planned for the fall. Obviously, with COVID and everything, that would be scheduled. For the fall.
I got pushed a little bit.
Okay. What's it been like for you? I know you've worked on a few jobs here and there during COVID in terms of, still keeping everything really low key and restricted. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what that's been like for you.
Yeah, there's been a couple of small things. There's a documentary that I've kind of been working on, and it's we've been shooting in Milwaukee. But it's just a different world. The first round I did with these with the directors, one of the directors is in LA, and she couldn't come because she would have had to quarantine for 2 weeks. So I was going out and shooting some things, and I would be on the phone with her or sending her pictures about. We were doing a lot of exterior stuff, and so I would just kind of like shoot and send her pictures, and she'd be like, "Yeah, that's great." So. And then we did we did some interviews, and I had to I shot it, and I brought all my some of the lighting gear I have, and we tried to do a lot of things exterior, but there was a couple things we had to do, like a couple interviews we had to do that were interiors, and we just had to find, like, they found us a really big space, and we had a door that we could like ventilate. So we were, to try to keep the air circulating.
Right.
And it was very minimal. Like on set, it was me, the director, and the sound person. So even like, I think there was a couple PAs, but they were not really around. And even in terms of the gear, like we didn't want people touching each other's gear really. So that we kind of kept that separate. And then obviously we're all wearing masks, and it's definitely a change. It's crazy, but the experience is really nice actually. And the producers and the directors were just really accommodating and very, respectful in terms of like anything that any crew member, if you're not comfortable doing something, just let us know. Or if you have, if you're seeing something that doesn't feel right, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I actually think the experience has been pretty good. And I think I'm hopeful that that's what it will be like moving forward.
Right.
That, these guidelines are coming out, these white papers and stuff like that. And it seems like people are starting to figure out how this is going to work. I mean, we're still a couple months away before, especially in Chicago. I think some of the other shows are aiming for September too.
Right.
We'll see how it goes, but I know I'm optimistic that we'll make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, it's lucky that Chicago is doing pretty well in terms, compared to the other states. So that's hopeful in terms of when things could get back up and running. So
I know. I know. We've been doing great, and I just hope it continues.
Right. But also how fortunate and fun for you that, Showtime's already picked it up. So really it's just a matter of when it can start, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think, again, we were supposed to start, I was actually supposed to start prepping, I think, this coming week, next week. And then we get pushed a month. So I don't start prepping until August now. But we're doing 10 episodes this season versus 8 last season. So it's a little longer run.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And actually in terms of the pre-production, have you started on any of that, or what's that like for season 2?
No, I mean, I don't officially start until August, but I mean, in my, me personally, I've been doing pre-production and just kind of, because I haven't even really seen any scripts either. So,
okay. I was thinking,
a lot of it is I have ideas from season 1 that I wanted, that I had in season 1 that maybe I'd like to implement in season 2, or just things I'd like to do differently, or, right. And then just doing research, looking at things that you like and seeing, when you're watching shows and movies, keeping an eye out for something that looks like you like, oh, that'd be great. I want to try to use something like that.
Right. Absolutely.
That off, and I'm going to rip that off.
Right. Yeah. Actually, right now it's kind of that's a good point. Right now is a nice time for you to you actually have some time to work on some previs inspiration type of,
Yeah. Time. Mm-hmm. Take some online courses and kind of continuing education and
right.
Down, watching YouTube videos and going on all the forums and a lot of that, trying to stay fresh.
Right.
Talking about staying fresh, Michael, I got a nice little user question here, more in the advice category. You mentioned that you started in or had a lot of experience in tabletop and commercial work, and then worked on your transition towards narrative and more feature and serious work. What advice could you give towards a younger filmmaker who is ultimately aiming to go into the narrative realm, and how they could get there?
Mm-hmm. I would say search out people that want to create something. So if you're a camera person, or you're on the production side, maybe you're not writing scripts, or you're not directing stuff, but find people that have ideas, that they are writers or something, they want to film, and be like, hey, I have a background in production, I can help you do that. So even if that means like for Chicago, there's Second City, this improv community, right? So all these improvisers and stuff, they're all writers. They probably have things that they've written that they don't really even know where to start in terms of shooting it, because that's not their background. But if you have that background, search those people out. And then I would say I kind of had this revelation of just saying yes to as many projects as you can, even if it's something that you don't think it might not be that good, but just do it, because you're going to learn something from it anyway, even if it's a lot of times it's learning what not to do.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think that is a big part of it, is just searching out other collaborators, finding collaborators that will help you, that will have project ideas that you can work with them on and do it.
What I found interesting too, or find interesting about Chicago, and I think, viewers could take this into really any city, but Chicago especially is a big commercial town. So there is a lot of tabletop, there is a lot of that studio work, but all of the creatives that are doing commercials also want to work on narratives. And so I think, Michael, to your point, and that was something that I kind of learned was, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this project that I don't think is that interesting or, would love to do, but maybe that director or producer has an idea of something they want to shoot on the side. And that's, for me, that's kind of how I got into narrative, was these like side projects of all these, bigger creatives in the commercial world. So that's kind of a way to think of it too.
Yeah, like I've seen a creative director on set, I've had conversations with, and I was like, oh, you're writing commercials, but if you have anything that you're working on the side that you would like to try to shoot, I'd be happy to help you with it. Or especially like directors, when you're doing commercials, I think it's huge because, one, commercials is where you just learn so much, because you're doing a different commercial. It's like something different every time. So you're constantly learning stuff, and you're working with different directors. So, those directors are making commercials, but they have their side projects that they're looking to do. So, just, don't be afraid to talk to them and be ambitious and want to collaborate.
Yeah, good. And actually, you mentioned something earlier about some directing experience too. Is that something that interests you, or what do you kind of see, for your horizon moving forward after COVID and after work in progress? What type of things do you want to work on?
I think the directing for tabletop really is, it's a director DP. Like we didn't really have a defined DP. It was the director. So, so in that sense, because it's all like it's lighting and the camera work and all that stuff. So, those are the most of the things I was directing. But I love doing what I'm doing. I love shooting, and I love like collaborating is like just my favorite thing, and collaborating with other directors and people from different worlds, like, Tim and Abby, who are from this other world that I'm not in, this writing improv world. And I think it's so much fun to work with and collaborate with people like that. So I think, and being a DP, I think you're kind of in the middle of that, because you're communicating with the directors and the actors and maybe even the writers a little bit about what the story is, and you're seeing the scripts and you're providing input on them too. And then, but you also have the production side of it that's the world you're in too. So you're collaborating with all the camera department, and you're collaborating with your gaffer and G&E and production design, which is like probably what I had the most fun with in season 1. Was working with production designers and art department. So I just I really like that aspect of that, of kind of going into all the different worlds. I think as a DP, you really get to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. I think a lot of people, or at least when I was starting out, I didn't realize that I would be interacting as much with, like you said, the production designer, and there's so much to that, even as a DP, right? To tell your story. So that's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, the production design aspect of it was just really cool, because you're going to those locations and you're talking about what color wall do we think this should be? Where should let's put a couch over here. Let's put a little like bar over here. And then we can kind of, then I can get a shot like this. And, start it like with the show too, like you do feel a little lucky because you have the resources to do it, versus if you're shooting, you're shooting a documentary, you go in, you can't really paint people's walls and move furniture around. But so the production design of it is so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for joining us. Really enjoyed talking with you, and thank you everyone for watching. Definitely check out season 1 on Showtime. Again, today you can watch it for free for the last day of Pride Month, which I think is why they're doing it. It's a really great story and really great look with Michael's work here. Great.
Well, thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck with season 2. We can't wait to see it. And
yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching, and everyone stay safe.
All right. Thanks. Bye.